Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, and welcome back to The Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thanks for joining me on today's episode. So first off, I wanted to thank, I put up a post on Instagram asking for prayers the other day. I just hit 9 months on my pregnancy number 4, and as it seems as if any woman who's ever been pregnant before will relate to, hip pain and back pain have been meh, not great. And it seemed like it was really very strong, that pain the other day, and so I asked for some prayers in the immediate to help with that, and I had such a nice outpouring of support that I really do appreciate that. So thank you to anyone, if you were listening, that if you saw that Instagram post. Now that I am at 9 months, we're getting towards that last stretch before, God willing, a very happy, healthy 6 weeks, I suppose. I tend to go late, so my due date is October 11th. I probably will not have this baby in my arms before the 18th, but you never know. So if you have any prayers to spare, and wouldn't mind saying a prayer for myself and my baby as we finish up this pregnancy and go through labor and delivery and all the postpartum stuff, I would be infinitely grateful. And as I said in that Instagram post, if you have anything that you would like me to pray for you, I would be happy to do so. So either you can find me on Instagram at The Catholic Mama, or go to thecatholicmama.com/contact and send me a note there and let me know what you need some help with. I'm happy to answer any and all prayer requests, which I did. I had a nice amount of people reach out with prayer requests, and I was more than happy to add each and every one of them individually to my accidentally happened at 3 a.m. I made a mistake. I thought it was I don't have a clock in my room, and I try not to keep my phone in the room either on most nights unless I need to set an alarm. And I thought that it was dark outside, but it looked like maybe it was lightening up a bit. So I got out of bed, made myself a little morning snack, had a cup of coffee, and then looked at the clock, and it was 3:30 in the morning. So that was great. And that was after I got out of bed, because I prayed the rosary while in bed, and I didn't fall back to sleep. So I did later. I did fall back to sleep because one of my youngest woke up, and I laid back in bed with her, and then I fell asleep. But I feel a little crazy. It almost would have been better if I just stayed awake. It's hard to sometimes. We'll see if I can make it through. But anyway, so this episode of this podcast, what I wanted to talk about was something that I kind of accidentally did. I accidentally started this kind of faith challenge towards the beginning of my journey into Christianity. And I may have alluded to it on a past episode. I'm not sure if I have. So we'll talk about it today. It was something that helped me way more than I thought it was going to. I don't know if it would work exactly the same. It probably wouldn't work exactly the same for everybody, but I think it would help a variety of people depending on their state of belief or disbelief or unbelief, I should say, and where they are in their faith journey. So I wanted to share it with you today. So somewhere along the line, my husband, he started digging his way out of atheism well before that was even on the radar. And this before, I was always, a spiritual but not religious person. It was like this weird, very poorly researched amalgamation of Eastern religions and horoscope reading and personal feelings. It was so subjective and ridiculous and unsound that it didn't really take that much once, I think my husband is a very smart fellow. I certainly respect the things that he says. And so when he started talking to me about his disbelief, his atheism, it seemed like the most rational, reasonable thing. And especially in light of, you can't explain without God. It's very difficult to make a coherent sense of the problem of evil and suffering. And I was kind of at that point in my own spirituality because I didn't, there were certain times where I would feel spirituality because I didn't, there were certain times where I would feel things, I'd have dreams that would come true, or I would have a feeling about a person that would come and be correct. So when those feelings were there, it was very easy to maintain my belief in my spiritual, whatever I had constructed, this set of beliefs that I had constructed, because I was getting feedback from something, I don't know what. I would mess around with a Ouija board when I was a kid, and the things would come true. It was easy at that point to be like, well, I'm on the right path. I'm getting some kind of feedback from the universe saying that this is right, I am right. I may have put this all together myself, but I'm unlocking something big here. Now, if those spiritual feelings stop happening, if suddenly the dreams stop coming, or the feelings about people stop happening and they're not true, you just feel like there's a dark night of the soul, then it opens a gateway to being confused, despondent, feeling despair. And that's where I was around the same time that my husband started talking to me about his atheism. Because it wasn't really something that we talked about that much when we were dating, or even in the early year or two of marriage. I don't know, we didn't talk about that stuff. I didn't even know what he believed. I knew that he had a family who was Catholic, and they would get married in Catholic churches sometimes, and I know his grandparents went to church every Sunday. But we just didn't really talk about beliefs. And he knew that I was kind of woo-woo spiritual and stuff. I was more apt to talk about it myself. So when he started talking to me about his atheism and where I was in my feelings of being cut off from some kind of message from the universe, it all gelled very nicely. And suddenly I was spiraling down into atheism. And it didn't take very long after that to get to a place of total despair and nihilism. And I gotta say, I was probably a barrel of monkeys to be around at this point. Although I did drink more wine than was probably healthy, because I was trying to get out of that feeling of despair. So maybe I was fun, who knows? Or more fun. Excuse me. So by the time that Pat had started doing his own research and digging his way out of atheism, I was long stewed in the trenches of nihilism and my own atheism. And I had no reason to get out of it. And in fact, when Pat started doing this research, and he was reading, it was not uncommon for him to read philosophy books. So suddenly when Aristotle showed up at the house, or something that said Aquinas on it, it's just Pat reads heavier books than I typically do, and that's what he likes, whatever. He's always ordering books off Amazon, he's always reading them. I didn't know that it was, Aristotle would get him to the god of the philosopher, and I didn't know that eventually he would get to Aquinas, who is a Catholic saint. And suddenly, he started telling me about, or asking me, I remember one day he's like, do you know about Jesus? And I just waved him off. I was like, yeah, I know about him. And what I knew about him came from a mischaracterization of my childhood. I grew up in the Bible Belt with, when WWJD bracelets were all the rage, and, Bibles would get chucked at you, driving along, and it seemed like anywhere you went, suddenly somebody would be asking if you'd accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. So it was like this weird, pop culture best friend guy. But to me, he just seemed like a broker, a middleman. A middleman that stood between a person and a good life and a good afterlife, whatever that was. I think I still believed in reincarnation at that point. So Jesus to me was just some guy that people who couldn't figure out the spiritual stuff needed some help. And Jesus was that guy, and that was good for them if they were weak-minded enough to need that sort of thing. Clearly he's not just a broker for the afterlife. But when Pat said that, do you know about Jesus? I was like, yeah, sure. I know about Jesus. I researched him. I made up my mind. I'm good without him, thanks. he's like, are you sure? Are you sure though? Because man, I think he's more than that. And I said, no, not for me, thanks. And I just totally shut down the conversation. But of course, what did Pat care about that? He's off on his spiritual journey, coming to becoming a Christian. So he's onto something big. Jesus for the first time in a way that I had already shut him out. There was no way that I was going at that point to see Jesus the way that Pat was seeing him. And if he's coming through this more reasonable, rational, philosophical lens, and then coming across this person of Jesus and the fact that he's God, I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff, especially because he never gave Jesus a chance, really, not since maybe a brief and unsatisfactory education as a kid in Sunday school. And my education about Christ had just come from the Bible Belt and being turned off by people who were proselytizing in a way that I just didn't need and didn't feel called to respond to in any positive way. So I shut Pat out, or I alternated between being angry. So I either shut him out, I'm like, no, I'm good, thanks. You just keep reading and just leave me out of this. You just keep reading and just leave me out of this. But also very angry because I blamed, I didn't realize this, at the time, but I started to see it as I started pulling myself out of this atheistic trench, that I was blaming Pat for putting me there in the first place. I listened to him. It was my fault. I listened to him without doing my research, but it was just the perfect storm for atheism and nihilism where I was. So, it's my own fault. I've said this before in an episode I did not too long ago about how much the media had affected me as a young one and not so young one, that I just tend to be more sensitive to other people's beliefs, or I used to be. Since I've become Christian, it's amazing how much that's changed. But, so I was angry at Pat because he brought me down there, and now he was going to leave me. Oh man, I was furious. But even still, as this was going on, because he was so chatty about it, and he started writing about it, and he started very tentatively podcasting about it, because, my husband's business is mostly fitness and business, not necessarily philosophy and theology. So he didn't want to alienate or scare off his typical base. So, it slowly started infiltrating his emails and his podcast episodes until, now it is so fully woven into his whole business model that, and people come in and to listen to him talk about this stuff. So, his journey was very different. But I would watch all this happen, and I read he had given me a case for Christ, or the Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, because he knew that I like historical stuff. I wanted something that was accurate and real, and it goes on faith and feelings. Because I always thought, it must be so nice for the faithful. They're just so ignorant. They can have their beliefs. That must be so nice. Okay, if there's a brief blip in the recording there, I had a little 2-year-old visitor at the door. I usually stay up and record episodes when everybody's asleep, but I did not do that last night. Instead, I watched the ending of a show that we got into that has been off air for like 5 or 6 years. But my husband and I got into it. It's a silly show, whatever. Burn Notice. It was on USA Network. Anyway, it was always on around Monk and Psych, and I never paid any attention to it. But we had just happened to start watching it a couple months ago, and we just finished season 7 last night. So, and if you can hear that, that is a train coming by, a freight train. So lots of noises and distractions, but let's keep heading forward. If I can remember where I was in this story. Oh, so I read, that's right, The Case for Christ. And I decided that as I was reading through the book, as I started to read the book, I was struck by the fact that this was somebody who was an atheist himself, had started, it's a true story. He was an investigative journalist, which my family's background is all in journalism. So of course, I feel this connection already. And Lee sets off he does all this research into Christianity, into the person of Jesus, because his wife had converted. And he was feeling similarly betrayed as I was by my husband's starting to convert towards Christianity, because they were both atheists together and they were in this together. And I said, well, okay, you got me hooked on that alone. I feel you here. And then an interesting thing happened. He starts to investigate Jesus Christ from a variety of historical angles, that he, finding that there couldn't be a mass, a delusion when he had resurrected. 500 people can't have that same delusion at the same time. That would be miraculous in itself, that he actually existed. There's documents that prove this, and just how powerful even just the earliest surviving Bibles are in proving Christ's existence. And small things, people who are lying don't go to their deaths for a lie, right? So you have how many of the original apostles, how many disciples went to their death believing in Christ. If they were lying for something of their own gain, it didn't work because they all got killed. So these little things, I started to read the book, and I started to think, okay, well, maybe it's not unreasonable to believe that Christ had existed in the first place, that he wasn't just some archetype or pieced together person from a variety of different people. They just kind of put them all together. Like, who was Buddha? We don't know exactly. Maybe it's something similar to that. So I started opening my eyes to Jesus as being a real person, and maybe not being a lunatic or not a lunatic, but kind of like a crazy guy that he might have been. I can't think of who wrote it, but the same guy who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull had written a book that I think is called The Messiah. I could be wrong. And having that book on my mind over the years also had painted Jesus in a certain unfavorable light, as far as I don't know if it was after I read the book, because I was about halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way through, when Lee Strobel had explained the redemptive act of what Christ's death had done for all of this. Because the idea that Christ died for my sins, that was another thing. The same as, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? I just could not get. I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean my sins? I did not believe in original sin. I didn't even believe in sin in general. Mistakes were not real in my mind if you learned something from them. So if I made a mistake, no matter how badly I hurt somebody else, so long as I learned something from it, like not to do it again, or not to do it in that exact way again, it wasn't a mistake or a sin. It was just a learning experience. So I did a lot of damage to people with that concept as well. So the idea that Christ had died for my sins, please. It was very hard for me to get around. But somewhere in that book, Lee explained it in a way that spoke to me so perfectly. And I understood how Jesus had marked off the red in my ledger. And there was certainly red. I could see that now. I closed the book, or I shut down my Kindle. I can't remember. It was probably not as dramatic as, slamming my book shut. I think I just turned off my phone. But I was sitting in the dark in a bedroom with my youngest, or I think my youngest, nursing her to sleep. And I turned off the phone. I just sat there in the darkness. I went, oh my God, I think I'm a Christian. Because I actually believed in enough. I wasn't all the way there. I didn't have everything. But this is what brought me to the point of this episode. Is I decided why I was seeing this ad on Facebook, because it was like a conservative religious advertisement. And at the time I wasn't really following anything like that online, I don't think. But it kept coming up. I kept seeing this ad about what if for 1 month you believed. And by the time I actually tracked, that idea kept, when I started to realize that maybe I was a Christian, and maybe Christ was real, and maybe I did believe in all this stuff, that phrase kept coming to mind, like, what if for 1 month you believed? And actually, I went back and tracked down the advertisement, and it had nothing to do with becoming religious or Christian like I had thought it did originally for some reason. I don't even know what the ad was for at this point. But what I took away from it, from looking at it and from my own personal experiences, it just got layered on top. And suddenly I was like, you know what? What if I did? What if I just spent 30 days, and I don't want to say phase, and I don't want to say fake it till you make it, because you don't want to fake being a Christian, but I wasn't saying I was going to fake being a Christian. I was like, what if I just lived the life? What if I didn't question any of it, and I just tried it? I just researched it, and not to say that, questioning is good. You should question. But the way I had previously questioned anything was in a very skeptical, cynical manner, where there wasn't a point of learning anything. It was just a point of putting it down and getting rid of that idea. So what if I questioned things, but it was in a spirit of research and learning and true scholastic endeavor? What if I wore a cross around my neck? What if somebody asked me if I was a Christian for whatever reason? What if I said, yes, I am, and didn't think twice about it? What if I went to church? What if I prayed? What if I actually talked to God? And what I found, and I was like, you know what, I'll journal this. And so every day I would write down my thoughts about or everything I had read. So I started reading the Bible, and I was still reading The Case for Christ. And so I'd jot down what I wrote or what I had read, and I would give a brief synopsis of what I had read, and then any feelings or thoughts I was having. And I mean, the first couple days, I still have my journal entries typed up. Those first couple days, I mean, there's real doubt and conflict. I bought a cross for a little necklace. And I remember the first day that I walked into my office job at the time, I felt like I was wearing, a 50-pound brightly lit weight around my neck. It just felt like flashing lights, like, hey, look at me. I never in my life, a week before, I never would have thought about wearing a that isn't me. That's for weaker people who need Jesus. That's a bad thing. We're all weak and we need Jesus. It felt so foreign to me. And so in those first couple of days of my journaling, I mean, you read the anxiety and the stress and the turmoil I was going through. But it is amazing. And this only got me to being a Christian. Catholicism came a little while later. But it got me to being a Christian in the general sense. That for my plan was 30 days of journaling and acting like a true believer. So I went to church on Sundays. I read the Bible every day. I prayed every day. I had questions and I looked them up. I looked the answers up. I wore my cross. I worked very hard on forgiveness, which is something that I in the past have been pretty terrible about. I'm historically a grudge holder. But I just tried. I did everything that, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I thought about all that from all the things I was reading and learning about him and what I thought it meant to be a Christian and what I was learning what it meant to be a Christian. I just committed completely to it for 30 days. If I didn't agree with something that I read, instead of just blowing it off and saying, well, I like everything else but this, and just picking and choosing, because I had spent my whole life just picking and choosing different parts of spiritual traditions, and I decided not to do that again. So if I had a question or I didn't particularly like a certain aspect of Christianity, instead of just blowing it off and saying, I'll choose everything but this, I did research and I learned, and I gotta tell you, I didn't have to journal. I actually stopped journaling a week in, because the turmoil was gone, and what was replaced was a sense of peace and excitement at the same time, which is a funny thing to think about. But if you spend all these years trying to find answers, and every answer is going to be unsatisfactory until you get to Christ and fully embrace Christ, that to finally get to a point where everything started to make sense and all the questions that I had began to fit together, and the puzzle was just fitting together. The locks were being unlocked. It's exciting. It was very exciting, but at the same time, very, very peaceful. So it does make sense in that light. But I found that I didn't have to do this crazy amount of journaling, because I'd always been a journaler. And so, I'd look back at my previous print journals and angst and wondering and dissatisfaction about life in general. And for once in my life, I had nothing really pressing to write about. I was just feeling this intense peace and joy at finding answers that just fit so perfectly on every issue that I had, every question I had. So this challenge, I told Pat about it after the fact, because I realized that if I was just going to fake it till I make it for 30 days, the worst that could happen is I didn't have to tell anybody that I was doing this. I didn't tell Pat at first, my husband. I absolutely did not tell him because I didn't want to be roped in and committed to something in case I needed to back out real quick. But if I had to tell somebody and I got to the end of the 30 days of research and prayer and worship, and I realized that I still didn't believe in any of that stuff, well, then it would take a slight ding to my ego. But even better, I could just say, well, look, I was an atheist. I gave it a good solid shot. I did my research. I lived the life for 30 days and I still didn't believe it. Well, case closed. So I thought that it would at least validate my feelings and my beliefs no matter what. No matter what I could save face during all of this. But so after the first week or two, when I started realizing, wow, I was like, wow, I think I am really a Christian. I do believe this stuff. I don't even have to just fake it for 30 days. This is kind of big. So I came clean and I told Pat my challenge to myself, and he was floored. He's like, you know what? More people should do this. You should talk about this idea, or this faith challenge. And so I haven't, just a year and a half or almost 2 years later. Actually, almost 2 years later. It was in November of 2017 that I did this. So here's my advice for anybody, because it helped. I could see this helping no matter where a person is, whether they are somebody who has fallen away from the church entirely, maybe because of the scandals or maybe because of poor catechesis in the past, and they just didn't understand it. So, they just got out, but they're maybe still curious, or they're coming back on their journey, to people who were never Christian in the first place, but don't really know how to begin. I would suggest, because this worked very well for me, is to spend 30 days believing, living the life. If you have questions, do research, find good resources. I would gladly provide some if you need very specifics, but as far as the Catholic questions and answers go, Catholic Answers is a great place to start. This podcast, and just listen to old episodes, and many more questions or concerns, or trouble spots with a real genuine interest in finding out the truth. Read the Catholic Catechism. That's just the perfect guidebook for life. Go to Mass once a week at the very least on Sundays. Try to go to daily Mass, because I think the reverence that you'll find there is even more interesting than on a Sunday Mass in particular. Pray the Rosary, pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Just talk to God. Strike up a conversation with Him. He wants to hear from you. Talk to somebody, a beloved grandmother who passed away. Talk to the Virgin Mary. Journal if you want. Read books. I loved The Case for Christ as a good starting point. Clearly that made a huge impact on my own journey. But just for 30 days, just walk the walk, talk the talk, pray the prayers. Just walk the walk, talk the talk, pray the prayers, worship, and do it as, sincerely. I'm not saying to, just pretend and go through the motions, but really, really commit to it. Because, in light of even the recent Pew study that says that most Catholics don't believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, that's kind of huge. So if that's a sticking point for a person, reinvest in your Catholic catechesis. Learn more about the real presence. And for 30 days, approach the Eucharist and Mass as if you truly believe in it. Even if you still have some doubts or questions, approach it and pray to God that you can truly approach it as if it is, which it is, Jesus Christ. Or, you don't have to just take a passive role in hoping that your faith life and your faith in general improve. And so I like this idea of 30 days of committed time to improving that belief, deepening the belief in whatever ways that you might be struggling, because we all have questions that we can't have answered, or we've gotten away from our faith practices and we don't really know where to jump back in. Well, spend 30 days doing it. And it's a little less maybe intimidating than an at-home retreat or a consecration, which I do really love those as well. But for just starting off, or, you want something extra, but you're not really sure how to really give your faith a boost, spend 30 days acting and reading and praying as a true believer. And I think that you will find something clicks inside that will that'll reinvigorate the passion that you have for your Christian faith. Well, I hope that helps. I mean, it really changed everything for me. Again, I didn't have to, and everything fit into place, and questions got answered, and I was at peace, and I was praying, and it got me on the path. And like a month or two later, I realized that there was something to this Catholicism idea, and started going down that route. But it was this starting off of just being willing and open to Christianity. That's all it is. What I basically did in that 30-day period was invite the Holy Spirit to work within me. And I didn't know it at the time, but with that invitation, he certainly did do a number on me. So God made quick work of me once I was open enough to let him change me in the first place. So I hope that helps. And again, if you have any prayer requests, reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer those. If you have any questions about the Catholic faith or where to get started, also happy to answer those either on a podcast or individually. You can go to the Catholic Mama on Instagram or thecatholicmama.com/contact. And also, I will say before we go, I noticed somebody left a really, really nice review on the podcast on iTunes the other day. Thank you so much. That made my day. Absolutely. I stumbled upon it last night, and I was floored. It was so nice. So thank you, whoever that was. If you would also like a chance to make my day and leave a glowing review for this podcast, I would love that. The main reason for this is that if you're unfamiliar with how ratings and reviews go on podcasts, excuse me, Apple, iTunes will, and Amazon or on Stitcher or Google Play, wherever it is, the better the reviews, the more reviews, it makes it easier to find. And the whole reason I do this podcast is because after living so many years as a sin, falling into atheism, climbing out and becoming a Christian and a Catholic, I want to share that. And the best way that I know how to do that is through this medium, and it's growing. And I love to see how many more downloads. I mean, downloads have doubled, and listenership has doubled for this podcast in the past 3 months. So that's amazing. You like what you hear, and I appreciate this. And the more reviews actually help spread, and so other people can hear this too. And that's the whole point, because I'm just here to help.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.